the political world watched in with great interest this week at the race in Georgia's 6th congressional district to replace Tom Price, the far-right physician who is now the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Democratic candidate. It was a toss-up, but Jon Ossoff did not make it past the runoff. There will be a runoff election between Ossoff, who achieved about 48% of the vote, and the runner-up out of a field of many Republicans. So it will be a head-to-head race with a Republican, making it tough for Ossoff to go all the way. But joining us now to talk about that election in a broader context, because I think it's important to do that. Returning once again to the program is David Daley. Dave Daley is the author of the book whose name I cannot say on the air, but we shall call it Ratf. And the subtitle for the new paperback edition, because it's coming out in paperback or has come out, is Why Your Vote Doesn't Count. He is also a senior fellow with Fair Vote. Dave Daley, thanks for coming back on the show.
Always a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me back on.
So let's talk a second about that subtitle, which you changed. Why Your Vote Doesn't Count. Isn't that a little disempowering to people? I mean, it's like, aren't they going to say, in the spirit of the title of your book, aren't people then going to say, F it, and then not bother with politics? And I know you've got a good answer, so I'm just curious to know what it is.
I hope it wakes people up. I mean, I think if we do not talk about the fundamental structural problems facing our democracy in exactly the language that we need to, we are missing the point entirely. This book came about because Democratic candidates got 1.4 million more votes for the House of Representatives in 2012 than Republican candidates, but Republicans kept control of Congress 234 to 201 and thwarted at every opportunity the Obama agenda. The gerrymander that made that possible is also in effect in countless blue and purple states across the country. Republicans control 69 of 99 state legislative chambers across the country, including supermajorities in some states where they can't get a bare majority of the votes. So under circumstances like that, your vote does not count in many states. If you are voting for a Democrat for the House of Representatives in Michigan, but you are getting a Republican supermajority, I think that suggests the vote doesn't count.
So there are really two problems here. One is that Democrats haven't had a strategy for capturing these state houses that draw the lines. And two is that the lines having been drawn, from that point forward, basically your vote doesn't matter, at least on that congressional level. Right? So is that essentially...
I think that's right. I think that there's a twofold problem. Democrats fell asleep at the switch in 2010. Republicans had a strategy to use redistricting and gerrymandering in an entirely new and brilliant way, although one might also call it, thoroughly anti-small d Democratic. It turns out it was pretty anti-big D Democratic as well. And once they took control not only of Congress but of all of these state legislatures, there have been policy implications as a result of this. The first thing that these gerrymandered legislatures and states do is go after voting rights. The second thing is labor rights. And the third thing is women's rights and social issues. And you see it repeated again and again in North Carolina, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, and Florida. We are getting policy outcomes that are wildly dysfunctional and disproportionate to what voters actually want. And in many of these states, the districts are drawn in such a way as to insulate politicians from the voters. And it's a profound constitutional crisis.
I don't understand, and I always had this feeling, I had the feeling reading your book, I had the feeling the last time you were on, whenever the subject comes up, I don't understand why people aren't running around like their hair is on fire, which in my case would be a brush fire, but, that
you and me both.
Yeah, well, but, why people aren't seeing this for what it is, which is a total challenge to democracy itself. People got very excited about what Russia did or didn't do. What about what the Republicans are doing? I mean, your book has hard evidence. We have hard evidence every day, and the vote suppression that's going on in North Carolina and other states, the outright racism of it, the anti-democratic nature of it. Why aren't people, do you have a theory as to why people aren't flipping out over this?
I think it's maddening and infuriating. But because gerrymandering and redistricting have been around since 1788, because you can trace it back to the beginning of the republic itself, people think that it's just politics as usual, that it's the way it's always been, and it's the way the system works. Within our elite political media, within the political science establishment, that is the conventional wisdom. None of them have come to terms with the fact that the game changed in 2010, that the Republicans went into the 2010 election with a strategy to use gerrymandering in a completely different way, and that big data and the kinds of technological data sets that are available to surgically craft voters became so powerful at this point in time that districting is a completely different game than it ever has been before. And until the media establishment and the political establishment wake up about this and start talking about it in the right language, we are never going to solve it. I mean, it sounds like it's a boring issue in some ways. I mean, gerrymandering is the thing that put us all to sleep in civics class. Except it's the fundamental building block of our democracy, these district lines. Republicans figured this out in 2010, and they changed the game. They twisted the basic element of our democracy. It's got to be twisted back.
No, okay. I couldn't agree more. Now let's talk about the Georgia race, okay? Because okay, you talked about language and how our media and how our political scientists talk about it. Here's an example of language I'm talking about. I was reading the Politico write-up of the results of the Georgia race, and it began in the first paragraph by saying, in a district that is traditionally Republican. That's how they described, and traditionally, to me, tradition is like, I don't know, you break a bottle over the bow of a ship when you christen it.
Yes.
That's tradition. To me, the boundaries of the Georgia 6th Congressional District are not traditional. Isn't that exactly what you're talking about the language that's used to describe this?
It's exactly what I'm talking about. Thank you for pointing that out. What always bothers me is the New York Times, in story after story, likes to use deconstruction because of the way district lines are drawn. It's a maddening passive voice blaming tradition or the way that it's done. It's done by people. It's done by partisans. These lines are not handed down on tablets from Moses. They are redone by politicians every 10 years seeking advantage. Democrats have done it for a long time as well. There is no political party here that is virginal and that doesn't have, some element of guilt here. But the game changes in 2010. The intent changes, and you can see it in the emails, in all of the court cases over the course of this decade that have ruled these districts unconstitutional. You can trace what the Republicans did, and you can see it in the results. We do not have very many swing seats left in this country. We are down to about 30 to 35 actual swing seats of 435 congressional races. And when that's the case, it is really hard to bring about any change, even when the people want it. in state after state that are blue and purple, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina. It's a lot of these same states over and over again. But these are the states that have built the Republican majority in Congress, and this is why it's so hard to beat. You have these 50-50 states, or states that may even be 52-48 Democratic, but they are sending to Washington delegations that are 75% Republican, 12-4 in Ohio, 10-3 in North Carolina, 9-5 in Michigan, 13-5 in Pennsylvania. It's out of proportion to the will of the people.
So basically, if somebody were to read your book, this is my take on it, if somebody were to read your book, Ratf by David Daley, what they would take away from it is that we all think gerrymandering, they took it from a folk art, or whatever, like quilt making, a traditional kind of practice, to a kind of factory, a mass production science, an industry where now they've got a lock. And so it's going to take a fundamental pushback, a fundamental reform to change it. So, for example, when we talk about Ossoff and the 6th District, John Ossoff, and the 6th District in Georgia, I think it was you. I think you made a comment in the media somewhere that at best the Democrats would borrow the seat for 16 months until the regular congressional election came up again, and then it would be inevitable that the Republicans get it back. Or now, since he's forced into a runoff, they'll probably keep it anyway. Is that still your prediction?
I think anything could happen in this runoff. It's probably a 50-50 race. It will depend on turnout. But what the Democrats have done here is they spent already at least $8.3 million on a runoff to rent a congressional seat for the next 18 months. And between now and the runoff on June 20th, they will probably spend a couple $1 million more. This seat does not really have any impact on Congress. It would change the Republican majority from 24 seats down to 23 seats. That's a lot of money for just about no impact.
Yeah.
The entire Ossoff race has been a sugar high for Democrats, and the focus is not in the right place. We can't change the system by trying to flip districts back in 2018. We need to understand that the structure of the system means it has to be undone by flipping back state legislative chambers, by winning governorships, and by unknotting the way that the system has been tied up through the redistricting process. And that means doing what the Republicans did and understanding how the redistricting process works and earning back seats at the table in that process.
I think that's so important. And I think, sure, the money that they spent to get the seat, honestly, I'm not that concerned about that. What I'm more concerned about is the sense of complacency that might be engendered.
Yes.
Look, we won the seat back. That means we're going to take the Congress back in 2018, as opposed to fundamental. Two things need to change, in my opinion. It sounds like you agree with me. One is they need a message that resonates with people at every level, and they don't have it right now. Number two is they need to be concentrating on, you can't win the game if your opponent is writing the rules. We got, I would say, about a minute left. Do you agree with that? And do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I completely agree with that. The key races for the Democratic Party in 2017 and 2018 are not these special elections. Democrats have to be focused on governor's races this fall in Virginia and next year in Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Florida. The state legislatures in those states are so dominated by Republicans that they can't be flipped back over the course of one cycle or two cycles. So if Democrats want to have a seat at the table in the 2020 redistricting process in these key states, the governors who are elected there in 2018 will have veto power over the maps in 2021. Democrats can win those races, or they can kiss all of those states goodbye for the next decade.
Well, I can't say it any better than that. So we will leave it there. David Daley, Senior Fellow with Fair Vote and author of the book Ratf, or words to that effect, subtitled "Your Vote: Why Your Vote Doesn't Count." Great to talk to you as always, and thanks for coming on the program.
Anytime. Thank you.